supposed to say anything intelligent, but
I'm not ready.
We don't do intelligent things on this show. Hello and welcome to another episode of Live here on Keystroke Medium. It is season 4, episode 3, and we have the phenomenal Chris Kennedy and the always amazing Kacey Ezell here with us today, talking about anthologies. I'm Josh Hayes. I'm here with my buddy Scott Moon, and we're going to have some fun tonight here on Keystroke. Welcome to everybody that's already... What is this emoji fest that we have going on in a live show? Like,
I found a coyote emoji earlier, and I put it up there, and it just all spiraled down. Actually, Caitlin started it with the dancing ladies.
I didn't even know we could do like all these emojis, and I thought it was just smiley faces and frowny faces.
It's not a matter of if you can; it's supposed to be a matter of if you should.
Right? Because you can do a thing does not mean you should. But great power becomes great responsibility.
Great responsibility. Da, 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 da. The only like the 3 worst Spider-Man movies ever made. For those of you that don't know, Chris Kennedy runs pretty much the Four Horsemen universe and Chris Kennedy Publishing. Kacey Ezell has published, I think, at least 1 or 2 novels in that and several short stories. And she also has her own Dragon Award finalist, The Minds of Men, for Best Alternative History Novel, which is also the show sponsor tonight. We'll talk about that here a little bit later. I've been neglecting to mention, though, on our show, if you want to sponsor an episode, you can go to our website, keystroke.medium.com, and click on the sponsorship area. It's very, very reasonably priced, and you get evergreen advertising for your service or book. Yeah, that's the end of my pitch. I don't know how to round that off. So
you should say something about coyotes.
And coyotes rule the world. Chris, you're kind of the main guru in the anthology department, which is kind of what we wanted to talk about tonight. It was Kacey's kind of idea to talk about curating and setting up anthologies. She's doing one later on this year with Larry Correa, and that's going to be fun to have them talk about that on the show. What are we doing? May, I think? May?
End of April.
End of April.
Yeah, I'm currently working on 3 at the moment, so yeah, I have a little bit of experience with them. Got yes. 5 of them out, and 3 separate ones working right now.
That's insane.
Yes, I am. I'm crazy. I really am.
I think all the regulars of the show are very familiar with who you are and what you do. But for someone just tuning in tonight, or maybe on the podcast for the first time, can you just introduce yourself and give us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Sure. I'm Chris Kennedy. I'm a former naval aviator, an elementary school principal, now science fiction, fantasy author, editor, publisher. Run a tiny little company called Chris Kennedy Publishing. That has 5 imprints, presently about 15 people that are writing for us. I am one of the co-creators of the Four Horsemen universe, along with Mark Wandry, who had the original idea for it. And I am the publisher for all of that under the 7 Seal imprint. We had 19 books in the series last year, and right now we're scheduled for about 19 more this year. So just on average, just a little quicker than every 3 weeks.
Every 3 weeks.
I don't even understand how you even process that schedule. Like,
well,
I'm counting in my head. I'm like, I've got 5 this year, and I don't need, like, I'm like every day. I'm hustling trying to get this stuff done.
I published 45 books last year, and I said, okay, this year I'm going to slow down. I'm only going to do 36. That'll make things a little more sane for me. I was doing the year ahead presentation for MarsCon. Was it just yesterday? Oh dear God, it was. And I went through it all, and I looked at all the ones that we have in the works, and there are 48 months left, or 48 weeks left to go in this year. And in those 48 weeks, I have 50 books to publish. So I'm slowing down well.
Yeah. Chris, Chris, we may need to work on your definitions of slow.
Yeah, I'm not sure you get it. You ever seen that commercial with the old ladies and they're doing the wall and they're like, that's not how any of this works.
Is
Like
that how
that's,
this works?
That word does not.
You did say that intelligence was not necessary tonight, so there we go. I'm going to throw that right into the ring.
that is true. Ridiculous.
That is ridiculous.
Casey,
If it weren't for my wife Sheila helping me out and being awesome, it wouldn't be possible.
Awesome.
Get a plug in for her right now. She's awesome.
I have to tell you, we've got
sponsor.
this year we've got a lot of people helping out with the company, and I'll tell you, I don't know how I managed to do what we're doing, and I can't even fathom doing what you guys are doing. So bravo to you guys for setting all that up. It's always cool when you talk about, I'm doing 1 or 2 books, and then here comes Chris. I'm doing 87 books in 2 months.
1 or 2
Come
books.
on, that would at least take me 3
Those
months.
are rookie numbers.
That's 3 months worth. You know, even I'm not that good.
And going to all the conferences.
Yes. Kacey, you've written several stories in his Four Horsemen universe, and then obviously some of your own. You've been on the show before. Why don't you give our listeners and viewers, if they haven't heard anything about you before, a little blurb about yourself?
Okay. My name is Kacey Ezell. I'm an active duty Air Force helicopter pilot, mom of 2, and I'm a science fiction, fantasy, military, sci-fi, horror, whatever writer.
She's never met a genre she didn't like.
No, I like them all. There's stories. There's all kinds of stories to tell all the time. But right now I'm primarily focusing on military science fiction because that's what pays me the most. And as well as my alternate history series, which started off with Minds of Men, which is tonight's show sponsor, as you already mentioned. So I'm sure they'll get to hear about that later. But I published Minds of Men under Chris Kennedy's Theogony Press imprint. And that came out late 2017. I was honored to have it picked as a finalist for the Dragon Awards this past year. And then we are looking to release the sequel to it sometime probably either very late first quarter or very early second quarter of 2019. So I'm almost halfway through with that one right now. So I'm super excited about it. So that's my military alternate history series featuring psychic women because I'm sexist. And then,
Love it.
well, I mean, I am. Boys don't get to play. I'm sorry. So,
I like it.
It works.
But
Check it out.
in addition,
at least she's honest. Come on now.
I mean,
Right.
you know, I am what I am, right?
Right.
But in addition to that, I'm one of 4 authors on this planet that has had a story in every single Four Horsemen universe anthology. 2 of them are the series creators. So it's me and Terry Mixon. And one day I'm going to get us T-shirts. So I've done quite a few Four Horsemen universe stories to include 2 novels, one with Marisa Wolf called Assassin. And we are almost done with the sequel to that, which will be out again probably late this quarter. It is called Hunter, and we are like, I can say balls, right? We are balls to the wall trying to finish that by this month for Chris. So.
No, you can't
That's the
say
anti-sexist comment.
You can say
well, damn it.
anything you want.
There's some of my favorite things. So, you know, whatever. And
then we're changing the theme of the show tonight.
here we go.
That's it. That's the show. Show's done. That's all you need to hear. Good night,
Cheers, everyone.
By Minds of Men.
There you go.
And she got it in there. That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's because I'm a professional, yo.
That's right. That's exactly what Chris said. As soon as he said, I'm a professional. Off the rails, and it's not even been 10 minutes yet. This is
right.
ridiculous.
I haven't even gotten through the intro. So yeah, that's me. That's a lot of me. There you go. There you go.
And you just got promoted, right?
Yeah, I did. In September, actually, I got promoted to major in the Air Force after an excessively long time as a captain due to some youthful shenanigans.
Yes. When my dad My dad had a very colorful career in the military, and I don't mean colorful as in bad, but he is one of the very few people I know that has served in 3 of the services over his time.
Oh, wow.
He started
Wow.
in the Navy, and then went to the Air Force Reserve to do seminary and became a chaplain. Well, when he to become a chaplain, but when he finished seminary and went to go back in active Air Force, they didn't have any chaplain spots, so he had to he had to go to the Army, and that's where he became a chaplain at. And he had, all told, he had like 33 years service, and he was a major when he retired. Got passed over several times for lieutenant colonel just because of the way that the chaplain corps works, and
It's fair. Yeah.
it's very competitive, and you have to, it's whatever. But
Yeah.
what's funny about that is he was a captain for a while too, and when he got promoted to major, it was right around the time when that show Major Dad with what's his name was really popular. And so as soon as he got promoted, for like 2 months straight, we just called him Major Dad for like 2 months
Yeah,
straight.
sure.
Dad.
For sure.
And
Gave me a Pop-Tart, Major Dad. I'm hungry.
yeah, and he vied like for years to get promoted to lieutenant colonel, and they kept turning him down, and then he retired, and then Enduring Freedom kicked off, and they said, "Hey, can you come back?" And he's like, "Are you gonna give me lieutenant colonel?" And they were like, "Well, no." And he's like, "Then I ain't coming back."
That's funny. Yeah, that's funny. No, and go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, yeah, in my case, I never expected to be promoted. I fully intended to retire as a captain, because as I said, I had some. I got in some trouble for dating my husband, who at the time was a staff sergeant, and figured that was a fair trade, to have the man I love in my life and being my husband, and then and retire as a captain. Not a bad trade. And then the chief of staff this past year came out with like, you know what, we need people. Fuck it, promote them all. Right. So I was line number
promotion
one.
For you, promotion for you, promotion for you.
All my friends. So
the 19-year captain was first in line.
Well, 15 years. Thank you very much.
Way to go, Chris.
Don't make me older than I already am, please. But yeah, line number one. I didn't think those people were real people, but turns out I'm one of them. So.
Well, if Scott ever, when he tests for lieutenant this year, Scott has been a sergeant for so long, he won't. All he has to do is spell his name right on the test.
I got so much seniority,
and he'll have all the points for seniority. So
that's awesome, dude.
Yeah.
Good luck. I hope you spell your name right.
Yeah, we'll see. It's actually the worst job in the department.
He's going to spell it Scoop Moonay and just ruin the whole thing.
It's amazing how hard it is for people to spell my name. Or anytime I talk to somebody, they just don't get it. So
like moon, like the moon. Thing in the sky.
That's exactly that. Moon.
That's exactly what he says.
I probably said that 10,000 times in the last 21 years, but it always works.
So we were going to talk about anthologies at some point today.
We were,
Chris.
Oh, we got plenty of time. We got plenty of time. Let's slow roll.
You've done what do you say, 5 already, and you're working on 3.
Got 5 in the books. Yep.
And so Scott and I have done several with Nathan Heisted, and I think I've done 8 total anthologies, including one of yours, for a few credits more, which is right here. I know you had it too.
That, but I've published 5.
Right. And look at this tome. You guys see this? This is like,
I wonder why that book is so thick.
Well, it's definitely not my fault.
It has some really long stories in it.
It's definitely
my story in that book is 1,000 words long. It is definitely not my fault.
Yeah, it's definitely not my fault, and it's definitely not Scott or Mark's fault for sure.
Yeah,
we could have made a whole book just on those 3 stories. I think the combined length is like 40,000 words.
I just want to know, like, which story was it that made the cover so big? Like, you just had to keep expanding the template for the cover because of so many. You get Mark gets his story, like, it's expanded a little bit more.
I told the cover designer how many pages it was, and she said, "No, really, you're kidding, right?" I said, "No, that's how big it is." And she said, "Is Amazon going to let you have it that big?" I said, "I don't know."
We're gonna find out.
If not, we'll cut that Moon guy because his is like 12,000. And
Yeah.
I mean, if we cut Moon and Hayes, we got 25,000 words back.
I love that he said between 8 and 10, lowish 8 and 10, and Scott gave him 12, and I think I gave him like 10 and a half. That was my bad.
No. Oh, that's right. Yeah, Josh had like 11 and a half. And Scott's making fun of him, and he's awful, and he's awful.
I was watching.
And then as I was doing up the contracts, I went, "Holy crap, Scott's is even longer." And he was just playing that all off. He was using the 14th law of thermodynamics. If the heat's on someone else, it ain't on you.
Right. Exactly.
So
quantity has a quality all of its own, or whatever.
Word counts are really kind of just like a reference, right? Like it's like a stop sign. It's a suggestion.
Yeah, that's what Mark Wandry says too. You know, it's kind of like the matador's cape. You know, here I am with 8 to 10,000, and Mark's like,
oh, he's the bull charging through it.
Yeah,
challenge accepted.
Yeah.
That's right.
So when I did Moffat for Bane, one of the things that I found was interesting is Chris is like super laid back about word counts, right? But I couldn't be, because with the traditional model for publishing, where you're actually paying in advance on the stories, you know, you're paying those stories, and so the way that it works is Bane gave us Larry and I, they gave us a pot of, this is your advance money, you know. This is how much you have to pay the authors. And so I had to, you know, we invited some fantastic authors that I didn't want to be like, hey, I can't take your story because it's too long. So the way we ended up writing the contract was, we're going to pay 7 cents a word advance. We would like something between 7,000 and 10,000 words. But we're not going to pay, and you can go over, but we're not going to pay for more than 10,000 words. Sorry. So
that's smart,
yeah. Well, and I just thought that, obviously I didn't think of that. That was, part of the contract boilerplate from Bain. I was like, oh, that's fucking genius. Okay, great. Right. That way it kind of puts it on, the onus on the author that like, either you meet your word count or you're doing extra work to make the story work, but you understand you're only getting paid for 10,000 of those words.
They will pay a negative 8 cents per word over 10,000.
You're working for free after that.
So, I'd have to pay Chris to put my book in the anthology.
Pay to play.
So yeah, that's just I thought that was interesting. Seeing how it worked with a different publishing model.
Oh yeah.
And so what I'm curious about is. Most people, when they do anthologies, they do, like for instance, for Keystroke, we're doing themes. So we've got an epic fantasy one launching next week. We've got a near future one that's not titled yet. That's going to be out, I think April-ish, May-ish. But you and Mark did anthologies specific to something that's very personal to you, and that's the Four Horsemen universe. And to do that, you just didn't say, go and write a story. But you created a really kind of in-depth Bible, and even the Bible, the second Bible that I got for this new anthology is even more in-depth than the first one. And so I'm curious, what was the driving factor in doing the anthologies the way you did them, and did you see any challenges in keeping them canon, if you will?
Well, that's the biggest, issue that we have anyway. With I forget how many authors we have writing right now. I think there are currently 10 or 12 authors that are working on various forms of stories at the moment. It's actually probably more than that. But the most important thing that that we want is for the canon to be pure in the universe, and the best way to do that is to have a Bible for it. So as we were getting ready to do the first anthology, Mark put the Bible together. I went through it, made a couple changes, aligned a couple things. It was, Mark just said on the thing, he worked his butt off for it. He really did. And that was what was needed, because in many cases we were sending it out to people that you know, had heard of the Four Horsemen universe, but maybe not read so much of it. You know, so we wanted it to be pure. We did the best we could sending out Bibles, and you know, the authors generally did pretty well keeping it within that. There were a couple that we had to you know, that we had to massage, shall we say, a little bit to keep it where it was, you know, where it worked. But you know, in general, that was a really good place to start from, and in something to get everybody, if not perfectly in alignment, you know, at least close enough to where we could work with them to fix it.
There's plenty of room to write within that Bible, because there's so many opportunities within all the different, the world building, and that is really incredible. If anybody hasn't seen that,
yeah, a lot of hooks. Right.
We've now, you know, we're working on our 6th anthology at the moment. About half the stories have been turned in. I'm missing stories from 2 of the 3 people I'm talking to now. Thanks for getting yours on time, Kacey.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
Huh? It sounds like you're driving into a tunnel. Hello?
Hold on. I'm losing you. You're breaking up.
Anyway, you know, so, you know, we've had literally, you know, 45, 50 authors that have written in the universe, and to keep all of that within canon is, it's a big job, but, you know, certainly having the Bible done was, you know, made it doable. So that was, you know, and that's, I've had a lot of people that have said, you know, when I send it out to them, you know, hey, thanks, this was great, this is the best one I've seen, that it really helped me out. And you know, I know that there are many people that never read the first word of the Four Horsemen universe, but they turned in good books or good stories, so that's really cool.
I had not read Cartwright's Cavaliers when I wrote Gilded Cage for the first anthology. I read the Bible, you know, thought of an angle that I wanted to explore, contacted Chris to see if, you know, if that was good to go. He sent me a single scene from Golden Horde that hadn't been released yet, that, you know, involved my character, the race that I was going to be working with. And that's it. That's all that I had read out of the universe, because the Bible was so good and so detailed that I was able to then extrapolate and tell the story from there.
Yeah.
And I know with my story that it's in for a few credits more, there was a character that, first of all, who was the guy that stole my story name?
I don't remember what your initial one was.
It was Eikenberry. It was
Peacemaker.
Yeah, Peacemaker. That's okay. I like leverage better. But
take that.
It was
you like getting leverage, or never mind.
Yes, both. But it was something like the guy that I had, the characters that I had in Mark was over. The characters that I had in that were human, and at the time there weren't any human peacemakers, and so you gave me some points on how to change the characters, and that was really helpful to me to know that. With the anthologies as they go, because you've got your canon novels that are in chronological order, and then you've got kind of the anthologies that release in between those. Do you take things from the anthology or the anthologies and those stories and roll that into your canon novels, or are they just kind of things that happen in the background?
Yes, as a matter of fact, we do. That Peacemaker story that was called Peacemaker is now 3 stories. There was that assassin thing that is now an assassin book as well, and becoming a set of 3. Bjorn's Berserkers is now a book. There are a number of books that started out as short stories that are now full-length novels, and a lot of them are actually being merged into the main storyline at the same time. So yeah, we've tried to work them all in and make all of the anthologies valuable for the readers, so that they don't just, you know, go, well, I don't know why I'd want to read it. It's all just a, you know, bunch of things that aren't relevant to the storyline. But that's not true. As a matter of fact, there was a story in the last one that came out, Luck is Not a Factor, that talked about something happening that most people that have read A Pale Dawn as the advanced reader team didn't realize had happened because they hadn't read Luck is Not a Factor, and they went, "Oh my God, when did that? What?" So sorry, don't read the anthologies. You may miss something or a lot.
And how many do you, I mean, you said you had 3 planned. Are those all 4 Horsemen anthologies this year, or?
No, actually there will be, there's this one, and then there'll probably be another 4 Horsemen one toward the end of the year. I'm currently working on an alt history, naval alt history book called Those in Peril.
With
that
James
will
Young.
be, yeah, that'll be a set of 3. There'll be an air and a ground version as well. And I'm working on one that Jamie Ibsen has the lead on, that is called We Dare, and is augmented humanity as the theme. So there's cyborgs and implants and a variety of things to make people more than what they are or what they are now. And then so there'll probably be a couple others by the end. So we shall see. Oh, hey, look, there's James Young. Hi, James.
Speaking of,
Yeah.
We had some questions back in the chat. I don't know.
Yeah, see if you can find them. I'll touch the show sponsor here real quick while I'll touch the show. I'm going to touch on the show sponsor real quick.
Wow. I knew this show was going. I knew that's where we were
Scott
going.
looks for the questions. Woo!
Well,
you take all the good jobs.
Yeah, this is like the most raunchiest episode of Keystroke Medium in history.
Oh, honey.
Change the time.
I can get so much worse than
Let's
this.
ratchet it up. Ratchet it up. There's the link in the live chat if you're viewing live on YouTube. And apparently that's what I need to mention. If you're listening on the podcast on iTunes or Podbean or Stitcher, wherever you listen, if you come to YouTube and search for Keystroke Medium, you can find our channel there and then watch us live on Mondays and Tuesdays as we're having now. Apparently there was some people that had that couldn't find the show. So if you're listening and not watching, just Google Keystroke Medium or go to youtube.com/c/Keystroke Medium. That's our show. And hey, there's Roland Denzel right there. And
it's amazing how many people we met in Vegas who had not watched the show live, but had been watching.
Like, you guys are live? I'm like, that's the whole. I mean, you guys,
really cool.
The whole thing. Okay, so the show sponsor this week is Minds of Men by Kacey Ezell, and this is actually a running company. I say gag, but it's not really a gag, because once we get to this word that you're going to recognize here pretty quick, we've had like 3 people try to pronounce it, and I think only one's done it justice. So I'm going to try. If I fail, don't hold it against me. Minds of Men. It's the 2018 Dragon Award finalist for Best Alternate History Novel. Evelyn Adamsen grew up knowing she had to hide her psychic abilities lest she be labeled a witch. However, when the U.S. Army Air Corps came calling in 1943 looking for psychic women to help their beleaguered bomber force, Evelyn answered, hoping to use her powers to integrate the bomber crews and save American lives. She was extremely successful at it until her aircraft got shot down. Now Evelyn is on the run in occupied Europe with a special unit of German Fallschirmjager and an enemy psychic on her heels. Worse, Evelyn learns that using her psychic powers function as a strobe that highlights her to the enemy. As the enemy psychic closes in, Evelyn is faced with a dilemma in her struggle to escape. How can she make it back to England when the only talent she has will expose her if she uses it? Dun, dun, dun. That's Minds of Men, The Psych of War, Book 1 by Kacey Ezell. It's a really phenomenal story. You need to go pick it up on Amazon right now. You can use the link in the live chat, which all these shenanigans going on here are moving the link around. You have to scroll up now. It'll be in the show notes. And it's been the show sponsor for a couple weeks now. So if you haven't purchased it yet, go and do so now. Oh, yeah, I have to say Doom. And Doom, even though it wasn't in the description.
It's mostly
Did I get the word? Did I get it right? Fallschirmjager? Fallschirmjager?
You just there you did. Fallschirmjager.
Fallschirmjager.
You lived in
yeah.
Germany. You should get that right.
I did live in Germany, but we did not have Fallschirmjagers. Or I didn't know that we did. What is a Fallschirmjager? What is that?
Paratrooper.
Oh, a paratrooper.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
One of the cool things that you guys watched or read Man in the High Castle on Amazon?
I have not. I wanted to, and then I started being a writer and started having a life.
I'm so behind on
One of the coolest thing is I've noticed.
What is this TV thing of which you speak?
Right. The only time I get to watch TV is when I put my son to bed, because I'll watch on my phone and my headphones, and he'll like drink his bottle and then rock off to sleep, and I get like half an hour of watching TV.
That's really responsible of you not to
right
to the shows you're gonna watch.
Right. So
the only thing I've watched lately is Letterkenny.
I don't even know what that is.
Oh, okay. We'll talk.
Okay. You, me, after the show.
After the show, and the post show is gonna be epic.
The cool thing that I like about Man in the High Castle, and it's probably not just Man in the High Castle, but it's the first show that I noticed, is when of course it's the Nazis have invaded and they occupy from the eastern seaboard all the way to basically the Colorado border. And then you have the Rockies as the neutral zone, and then the Japanese occupy the entire Pacific coast. Well, the Germans, they use the German ranks, obviously, but I've never heard them used as German ranks. They're always like colonel or lieutenant or whatever, which is not what they call them in Germany. So like the actual,
it's weird.
Yeah, it's so the actual like Obergruppenführer is a rank in the German military.
That's easy for you to say.
Easy for you to say. But I'd never heard it done that before. And so I thought that was really cool, like the way that they use those ranks. And so I'm using that in some of my fiction. Not that specific word, obviously, because it's German, but make stuff up and make them different.
Well, and if you do audiobook, one of the things that just blew me away about the quality of the narration that we were able to obtain from our narrator, whose name is Jennifer Gellaraya, and she's amazing, and you should go buy all of the audiobooks she's ever narrated. She put in a ton of research to be able to do exactly that. Yeah, to be able to pronounce. And I didn't think about this when I was writing the book, because I wasn't writing it thinking, oh, this is going to go to audiobook. But I have like 5 or 6 different accents involved there, because I've got like some Dutch and some German and some French and an American accent from the Bronx and one from like the Deep South. And so it's
it wasn't just accents, it was foreign words too.
And
people
actual, and Jennifer
that stuff anyway.
She was fantastic. So
I had 2 people sending her different things in Dutch on how to pronounce things.
Right. Yeah.
But she asked for it. She's like, "Hey, I want to know how to do this. Do you have anybody that can pronounce it so I know what it sounds like?" I mean, that's the kind of pro she is.
This is the kind of pro I am. The kind of pro I am. I have a German scientist in my Terra Nova series, and so I just had him speak with like this stereotypical German accent and wrote everything phonetically. So all his these are Z's.
What's your
we have ways of making you
what did your collaborator think of that?
Right. They all sounded like that dude from Hogan's Heroes with the glasses. And then the funniest part was Richard got the manuscript and he took all of it out. He was like, no, they can't read phonetically. The readers will get pissed off. Well, then when Luke Daniels read it, he read it phonetically. And I was like, score, I win.
Awesome. Let's do a couple of questions.
Yeah, go for it.
So 2 questions. The first one, Kayleen asks, what is your preferred method of gathering stories for your anthologies?
Well, we've got a couple different ways of doing it. There are some that are open, and I'll announce it either For the Four Horsemen ones, it'll be announced on the Four Horsemen Facebook group, which is the 4HU Merc Guild. If you're looking for it, please come join. Or through my mailing list, I also announce it there. The other ones, you know, there have been a couple, not many, but a couple that were invite only. And you know, the purpose of that is to get people that we know that, you know, can write a good story and you know, bring something to the table to help market it, so that, you know, everybody wins. But usually I like to try and get 3 or 4 new authors in. I was lucky enough to have somebody put me in an anthology when I started out, and gave me a bit of a leg up there. And I like to do the same, you know, in the anthologies that I put out.
Yeah, absolutely. So Noir Fatale was an invite-only anthology, and working with Larry. So just so everyone's clear, you know, the dynamic of it was I pitched him the project by saying, "Hey, how would you like to do this project with me? I'll do all the work. You put your name on it, and hopefully we'll both make a ton of money." And so that's that's the dynamic that we set up. I love that.
That's how you make friends.
But you know, with him having his name on it, you know, and with his name being the selling point, to be honest with you, you know, that gives him, that set him up to basically have quite a bit of creative control. So when we sat down to build our invite list, we essentially decided, okay, we need, you know, 13 is a good number. We're looking for about 13 stories. We'll each include one, so that leaves 11 people. And then I learned throughout this process that, you know, for an anthology, what Bain at least likes to do for an anthology is have about a 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 mix. So 1/3, you know, of your superstars. These are the names that are going to sell the book. And then 1/3 of your up and coming mid-lister type people. And then 1/3 of new voices that, you know, no one's ever heard before. So that's sort of what we tried to stick to. So we were super fortunate to get some real superstars in not just in the science fiction genre, but, you know, Laurel K. Hamilton's an urban fantasy author, and you know, she's a powerhouse, and wrote a great story for us. And so, you know, we had, you know, basically 3 really, you know, we had Laurel K. Hamilton, David Weber, and then Larry, you know, were kind of our 3 big powerhouse names. And then we had some, you know, again, some solid mid-listers. And then there's the new folks like me and Hinckley Correa, Larry's daughter. We invited her to submit a story. Cool. Yeah, and she wrote a great story. So that was really neat. But it was all people, because it was an invite-only anthology. It was all people that we knew or that we knew through networking. So once again, you know, if anybody, yeah, exactly. It's so important to make those connections with people through conventions and, you know, podcasts and Facebook groups and whatnot. So yeah.
Excellent.
Or
be born.
Right, or be born. Well, I'd never thought about the 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 rule. However, I think I subconsciously did it.
Right, it makes sense, right?
It's pretty natural.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because, well, and the first anthology we did, this fantasy anthology, we ended up taking 14 stories. Casey's got a story in there that's really, really good.
It was super late.
Well, that's okay. Look, I'm all about late, right? I'm all about late.
As we've turn into late stories to Chris.
Well, it was just so funny.
You still got 10 days.
Oh, yeah. No problem.
Chris is giving you guys crap about being late for his anthology, and I'm like, Chris.
Oh, time him out. I love that. Yeah.
Please don't hold me up. Yeah.
Yeah, her story, King.
She's a witch. Burn her.
Yeah. How do you know she's a witch? She looks like one.
The very small rocks float. Very small rocks.
We did do the nose.
And the Edric and the Dragon, she wrote a very, very good story. Got super high marks from Ellen and Lauren, the 2 collection editors, and we've got some really good, really good stories that I think everybody's going to find something that they like. The thing about anthologies is you might not like all the stories, but you're gonna like what I think is
There will be
crazy about the
something.
reviews on Anthologies is like people give it 3 stars and go, I didn't like all the stories. I'm like, well, but you're not gonna like all the stories. I don't expect you to like all the stories. The cool thing about these collections is you're gonna find 3 or 4 or 5, 6 stories that you really, really love, and then go and check out those authors and read them.
Yeah.
And it might not be the same 3 or 4 authors. I mean, you're going to have your big names that people are going to read anyway, but you'll have a story in Anthology that are like, oh, I really liked this Josh Hayes story. I'm going to go read him. Or I really like this Kacey Ezell story.
Pronounce
I'm gonna go find out what she does. Hayes. Hayes is how you pronounce it.
Well, I think that's the beauty of an anthology. It works for authors because it gets their name out in front of a lot of people that probably wouldn't have seen it. And for the publisher, it works great because it gets the stories out in front of a lot of people that probably wouldn't have seen it. Right. So, you're bringing in a bunch of different groups of readers, and the readers get to find new authors that, they may not have seen before. And holy wow, I really like this guy, or I really like this gal, and I need to read more. And in every single one that we've done, we've had people, find new authors, and that's great. And some people found the Four Horsemen, universe, and hey, that's great too. So, it really is something that is cool for everybody involved. I never really liked short fiction much when I first started writing, but I've come to like it and appreciate it, and it really has a lot of good purposes, and a lot of fun in many cases too. So
a lot of times
it's kind of a good palate cleanser, I think, from a writer's
definitely.
Oh yeah.
perspective.
And it doesn't take that long either to read or to write. I mean, we were talking about this past weekend at MarsCon. For the majority of authors, you could probably write one in a weekend if you needed to. So don't feel bad that you only have 10 days left. But
I've got a premise. It's going to be 25,000 words. So I mean, no,
well, first of all, the most important question I have to ask is, Kacey, how long was your story? Because if your story's shorter, then I have words to play with.
Yeah, you leave some room for us to write really long.
I think mine was 8. I think mine was 8,000.
I'm good for 13 then.
But Mark's already in for 11.
Well, I'm good. I'm good for 12. I'll split the difference.
Let's see. Kacey had 8,300.
Yeah.
Nice even number.
So I'll just write that down. I get 1,300 of Kacey's.
I'm taking some of your words.
No, I already claimed it. I wrote it down.
Let's do another question real quick. Jared Henley asks, can you talk about contracts and rights, etc., with stories in an anthology? And he references the conversation you all had in Vegas.
Yeah, so I know that some anthologies run on a like JR's with his most recent one, Backblast. He did a 6-month release just based on some contract stuff that he did with the authors. With our first epic fantasy anthology that we're doing, we just did a straight payout, and then with the near future anthology we're going to do a royalty share. And there's pluses and minuses to doing both of those models. For instance, on a royalty share, you're not guaranteed really anything, right? If it doesn't sell well, then you might not get anything. Chris Kennedy's really got it locked down, because I think I've made more money on a Chris Kennedy anthology than I have on all the rest of the anthologies combined that I've done. Which is saying a lot, because I've done 8.
It worked out pretty well. Yeah.
I'm always happy to see.
Right. But it also has to do with genre too. So you look at what kind of genre are you publishing? Fantasy or mill sci-fi. Mill sci-fi is probably going to sell way better than most other genres, just because of the genre. But I think either way you go. Yeah, I think either way you go, I mean, there's plus and minuses to it. On if you're going to do like a straight payout, then you've got to look at you've got to work that into your budget, right? You've got to work that into your upfront cost for your anthology. If you're going to do a royalty share, then you don't have to look at your budget like that. You just have to come up with a way to dispense that money out. Chris, what are your thoughts on that?
You're absolutely right. I mean, there's pluses and minuses of both ways. I like doing the royalty share because all of the authors have a vested interest in its success. You know, if you are in one that's a straight payout and it's on the relatively low end of the straight payout ones, you know, you may not be as worried about promoting it heavily. You know, because, hey, you know, it only paid this much. And so I really don't care how it does. You know, I've got better things to do with my time, like writing another one to, you know, make some more money. You know, I don't want to make it sound totally mercenary, but you know, if you have a vested interest, you're far more likely to promote it and promote it hard, than you would if you don't. And I think that certainly helps. You know, but like you said, you know, if the anthology totally flops, then what? You know, then you're doing it for, you know, you really need the trust of the authors that you can pull it off. And then you have to actually pull it off. We've done well, you know, with the Four Horsemen ones, the 5 of them. You know, I think the first one that we did a year and a half ago is still hanging around in the top 100 of sci-fi anthologies. You know, so that's worked out very well. You know, but like you said, there's pluses and minuses of both ways.
Well, and I think too, when you look at anthologies, I think everybody needs to be on the same page. Anthologies are not going to make you rich, right? They're going to make you a little bit of money. They're going to get you exposure. They're going to get you connected with other authors. They're going to get connected with new readers, but you're not going to quit your day job on writing short stories for anthologies for the most part. I mean,
something to put on your author page when you're new.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and it's a training ground too. You know, you do a lot of honing of your skill with regard to you know, writing anthologies. I was actually telling Chris, one of the most formative experiences that I have had as a writer was actually writing my story for Forged in Blood, which was Michael Z. Williamson's anthology that came out 2 years ago. He's got a very abrasive online personality. But he was, when I sent him my story, I was sort of like kind of bracing, like, oh God, you know, all that abrasiveness is going to be pointed at me. But I was super pleasantly surprised because he was incredibly helpful and informative and, you know, teaching and positive in his critique. And it very much made me a better writer. Like I could see it happening as I, you know, made the suggested edits and worked through that process with him. I came out the other end and I was like, wow, that just working on that one story made me much better. So there was a huge return on my investment of time and energy in that sense of things, if that makes sense. Can I mention one thing about contracts before we move on to another topic though? One thing that because the only reason I'm thinking about this is because it came up on one of the panels I was on this weekend at MarsCon, and I don't remember the original context that it came up in. But one thing that I will say is that for writers, when you're doing, you know, anthologies, whether it's a traditional published anthology or an indie published anthology, whether you're getting a initial payout or a royalty share, one thing that you want to make sure that you look at is how long is the period of exclusivity, and does it make sense for what you're doing? Unfortunately, there have been instances of predatory contracts out there that have basically taken away a writer's rights for their story in perpetuity, for not an appropriate amount of payment for something that huge. So the writer can never get there. Yeah, exactly. The writer can never republish it. They can never, you know, expand it into something else. It's gone. And that's something
I was on
that
I would do, and it was really, you know, she gave up the rights to that story forever.
Yeah, and not just the story, the characters in the story, you know. So so that's one thing that I would really encourage. I mean, I'm lawyer spawn times two, right? So I'm always going to encourage writers to, you know, to have someone take a look at their contracts.
What's a good time frame? We had some discussion in the live chat about time frames. So if you're looking at contracts and you're either a anthology publisher or a writer, what's probably the best? What's a good time frame for exclusivity?
I do a year exclusive, and then after that, the authors just, you know, or whoever publishes it just needs to say that, you know, it was previously published in this book. You know, but you know, authors get it back after a year to, you know, that they can republish.
Yeah, and we did the same thing, I think, and I think we're going to continue doing that. You know, in the grand scheme of things, a year is not a lot of time at all for a book to be published, but
to make back
it does give the publisher or the producer that amount of time to, especially if you're doing KU through KDP, to get those page reads and to get that income that you wouldn't get if you didn't have it in KU. And the only way you can have it in KU is to have it exclusive, so no one else can publish it anywhere else. So that is a good way to recoup some of your investment, and then also make money for the authors that are in the royalty share, like you do, Chris, and the way that we're going to do it, the pay scheme that we're going to do it for, at least in your future anthologies, to do those quarterly payments through the year exclusive period, which I think is a really easy and simple way to just break it down and to share that exclusive money with those authors. So it's more beneficial for them to have it as an exclusive property to me in KU. So you're getting that money off of that quarterly payment.
I think 1 year is kind of boring, though. I think we should go with something a little more clear, like 372 days or
11 months, 12 days. 11 months.
No, then you got to be the one to keep track of it.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Well, I'll answer JR's question, which was, how do you handle the profits after that 1 year exclusivity? The way it works is the authors get paid for that year, and then when it goes to non-exclusive, then they stop getting paid, you know, because they can then use it for other places.
Right.
You know, so, you know, that's it.
Yep.
Right.
And that's basically what we're doing,
you know,
too.
you could argue, you know, all over the place about what's fair, what's not fair. You know, that seemed to me, I actually wasn't the one that came up with it. I used that from something else, from an anthology I was in, that I thought, you know, hey, that actually kind of seems to, you know, play out fairly for everyone involved. You know, if the anthology, you know, ends up only 1,000 in the black, like JR said, you know, where you have, you know, costs you have to pay, you know, that, you know, hopefully over the next period of time, it'll pay them off, and, you know, you won't end up losing money on it.
Yeah.
So.
Baen does 2 years, which makes sense if you think about it, because especially for some of their bigger anthologies that come out in hardback first, they're anticipating a hardback run and then a mass market paperback run, which, you know, usually about a time frame of 2 years. So it's, you know, it's essentially saying, okay, we're gambling that we're going to make, you know, that's the period of exclusivity. But that being said, the contract stipulates that it is a period of exclusivity. Your story can't appear anywhere else at that time. But I've now had 2 of my Baen stories that were published originally in Baen Anthologies that appeared in a different publication. I just had to request permission. Now, to be fair, that's a Letterkenny reference. To be fair, the reprint was also a Baen publication, but it was very simple. It was just a matter of emailing and saying, you know, hey, they've requested, you know, this editor has requested to include my story in this publication as a reprint. You know, how do I do it? Can I do it? And Toni Weiskopf, who, if you don't know her, she's fantastic. She emailed back. She said, yeah, very easy. All you do is just say, you know, originally published, you know, and then gave me the boilerplate language with the copyright. So.
Two of the things I want to talk about. Well, one of the things I want to mention earlier, Casey, you mentioned anthologies and short stories being kind of a training ground for your writing career. One of the things that that I didn't think about when I first got into short stories, and what I think about now producing them, is not only the exposure for an author to new readers, but also for an exposure to editors and learning from those editors. For instance, we have Ellen Campbell and Lauren Moore working on our fantasy anthology, and neither of those two editors are cheap to get on novel length projects. And so when you talk about being a beginning author and trying to hone your craft, if you can get into an anthology where you have a Gatewood or a Campbell or a Moore or somebody of that caliber that's looking at your work and then giving you constructive criticism on that piece, that in turn will help you build your craft when you go to write a longer work and make it better if you take that.
Absolutely.
Yep. And so that's another thing, like, you know, you look at how am I going to better myself as an author? Well, get in front of the eyes of an editor that can do good work to your story, and that will help you as a writer.
Sure.
Yep, absolutely.
Sure. Another thing too is that, sorry, Chris. Another thing is that not only do you, as an author, do you expose yourself to, not really expose yourself, but you expose your writing to.
Back in the gutter.
God, what is going on tonight?
Everybody,
you know this is going to happen when I come on. I'm sorry. That's just.
You're not sorry.
I bring the fun. It's not hashtag sorry, not sorry.
Yeah. Hashtag me too. Ready to go.
In all seriousness, where was I going with this? Oh yeah. So you expose your work not only to, you know, to professional editors and you know, for series creators and stuff, but you also have the opportunity to network with other authors, potentially co-authors who, you know, I mean, I've gotten at least 3 collaborations directly out of anthologies that I was in, you know, that people have invited me and have liked my story and said, hey, you know, I have this project. I think you'd be great on it. Would you like to work with me on it? And that can be a huge leg up for a new author. At least it has been for me, you know, so.
It's a good place to scout for talent, for sure.
Absolutely. You know, and that's, you know, again, part of the reason for that mix of old, you know, not old authors, but established authors and new talent, you know, that makes an anthology so exciting, I think.
And one of the cool things I think about, you mentioned collaborating and finding collaborators, but what a lot of people don't realize too, and what Scott and I have tried to do a couple times now, is anthologies are really cool. If you can get into them together, anthologies are really cool to play around with that collaboration aspect. And Scott and I did it in A Few Credits More. We're doing it again in this other one. And A Few Credits More.
Not a strategy.
Hope is not a strategy, right? The first one that we did, our stories kind of did this, where if you read mine, you had got this part of the story, and if you read Scott's, you got this part of the story. But then when you read both of them, you got the whole thing, and it was kind of a neat experience. And I saw some really cool reviews that mentioned that. And we're doing it again in the new anthology, where it's not going to be like this. It's going to be kind of like this, where they're
more sequential.
They're two solid
it's like a relay.
stories.
It's like, hand me the baton.
Yeah, there you go, and you can take it running. So that's cool too. You not only do you get to work with some really good editors, and you get to meet some writers, but there is possibilities there for some collaboration aspects. Earlier, JR mentioned, and he brought up talking about forwards and what our thoughts were on forwards for anthologies. I think they're really neat. I think they're a great way to not only get attention to your book, but also have kind of a big name person on your book without expecting them to write a short story. A lot of people don't have a lot of time, right? Especially the huge authors that are out there that you would love to say, oh man, if I could get this person in my book, I do well. Chris, you had David Weber, you've had David Drake, you've had some really big name people do forwards in our fantasy anthology. I've got Michael J. Sullivan to do a forward for me, and then I've got Peter F. Hamilton doing one for our space opera, and so I think they're really, really good. I mean, I love to read the forwards, and very insightful sometimes and very inspirational others. Chris, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. And I had it went Chuck Gannon, David Weber, David Drake, and then I wasn't sure where to go after that. I mean, I couldn't get any bigger than that. You know, it's like, where do you go? So I ended up doing the fourth one because I couldn't figure it out anymore. But absolutely, I think having them in there was neat. You know, like you said, the reason that I got them were because I said, hey, you know, I'd really love it if you could write a story. Sorry, I can't write a story. Well, would you be willing to do the forward to it? Oh, okay, sure, I can do that. You know, and when we were first, you know, putting together the first one, you know, we still really weren't very well known. So trying to get somebody was a little difficult. And we were at both Mark and I were at a con with Chuck Gannon, and you know, I had met Chuck, you know, several times, and Mark had met Chuck several times, and Chuck's just an incredible individual. And we said, hey, you know, we really would like to, you know, get you in for this. You know, would you be able to? And he was just so busy. He named off like 8 books that he already owed. And he's like, man, I really want to help you. You know, I like what you guys are doing, but I just can't. And then he said, but I could probably do a forward for you. And we went, yeah, score. All right, sure.
Nice.
You know, so that was how I approached David Weber, you know, for the second one. You know, I knew he was insanely busy, and you know, said, hey, you know, could you no, sorry. Well, how about a forward? Oh yeah, I'd love to do a forward. You know, and he's a super nice guy too. And you know, it worked out well. It was neat to have. You know, of course, you know, once David Weber gets writing, you know, the forward, you know, was a little bit larger than expected. It's like, you know, hey, there's a story in and of itself. That's cool.
That seems to be a trend with David.
Yeah. So if you got 3 or 4 hours, you can watch our last interview with him.
Yeah. Well, I'm writing with him now.
Awesome.
I'm writing the sequel to Out of the Dark with him right now, and he said, hey, you know, we need to kind of watch the length of this. You know, we're already up to 120,000 words, and we're about halfway, and I'd like this to be, you know, one of the smaller ones. But hey, here's this other chapter I want to stick in, and then I want to do a little more of this. And I'm like, not sure that's going to keep the length down, but okay,
let's do it.
More words for David.
What's really intriguing about that book and your guys's the sequel to that is Out of the Dark was my first audiobook that I ever listened to when I started my Audible.
Oh wow!
Account. When I started that account, I was training for a half marathon back in 2011, and I got tired of listening to the same music over and over again. So I started listening. I was like, I'll just listen to audiobooks, and his was the first one I picked up, Out of the Dark. And I can remember running around the neighborhood at like 10 o'clock at night, wanting to do extra laps so I could continue to listen to the book. So I'm really, really excited for that book to come out, because I'm like 200 books down now on Audible, and I want to add the sequel to that. So I think that's super cool. We are coming to the end of the hour, and as always, we could probably talk on the subject and many others for a long time. Do you know when you have plans for this book to come out? Do you know when you have a launch date for this next anthology?
It should be out. I'm guessing mid-April.
Okay.
Somewhere between the 1st and 15th of April, early April.
And Kacey, your anthology with Larry, the Noir Fatale, that's coming out in May?
May 5th. Yeah, May 5th. And I don't know I don't know what ER plans are available. Bain usually does do something available via Bain.com, so stay tuned for that. But it's a really fun one. I had a great time putting it together, yeah. So I think you guys are gonna like it.
Awesome. And I just finished the formatting for both versions of our Epic Fantasy anthology. So I got it to the authors today. We should have a soft launch sometime next week, and then it'll be a hard launch on probably the 31st, but we'll see. So lots of collections coming.
Yeah, I would say that the those in peril will be out on February 15th. So that one will be the next anthology that I have out, and that one's really good. And I'll plug Kacey's story in its sense. She's here just because of the name, if nothing else. She wrote naked. I don't know if she actually wrote naked, but she wrote the story.
And you know, she probably did that too. She was in her Ready 5 room, just typing away.
I definitely wore clothes while writing the story.
Disclaimer. Right. No clothes were hurt during the making of this book.
Right.
Yeah. I really didn't mean that to come out the way it did when I started.
Yes, you did too.
Yes, I got about halfway into it and went, yeah, okay, it's coming anyway.
That's half of everything I do.
Said.
Hey, Chris and Kacey, thank you guys so much for coming on the show again. It's always a blast to have you guys on and hang out.
Well, thanks for having us.
It's been great being here. Always a pleasure. Love hanging with you guys.
I can't wait for the post show.
Everybody that hung out with us in the live chat, thank you guys so much for hanging out with us on this Monday night. Come back and hang out with us. If you're listening on the live feed through YouTube or Podbean or iTunes, check us out on YouTube. Every Monday night and every Thursday night we do live broadcasts. There's always a metric crap ton of shenanigans that go on the live chat. And if you haven't subscribed, do that. Also, come check us out on Facebook. Our Facebook group, just search Keystroke Medium. You'll find us. We're the only one there. Come hang out with us. We'd love to have you. Until then, however, go do some writing. We're going to come back next week. We're going to talk about some reading. We're going to talk about some writing. And, of course, everything in between right here on Keystroke Medium. You guys have a fantastic Monday. Peace.
Bye, y'all.
Later.